Yo, what's up guys, Alpha, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of a deck that I've recently used to hit rank 1 with on the arena ladder. As you can see from the screenshot here, I'm currently 31-7 with this deck, so it's been performing really well for me. And now before I get into it, there's going to be an MTG zone link down in the description. If you click on that, it will have the full deck list there that you can import into arena if you want to try the deck out for yourself. And I'm also in the process of writing a full text article about this deck for MTG Zone Premium that will have more details, a full sideboard guide, how I change the deck for best of one, and some tips and tricks to help you play the deck as well. So as soon as that's finished and up, I'll link that down in the description. But anyway, with that all out of the way, this is my Bant Hammertime deck in Historic. And this is a deck that is largely built around these two powerful equipment cards, Colossus Hammer and Belt of Giant Strength. So these are both cheap equipment cards that produce a huge buff to your creature, but they cost a lot to equip, which is the big downside. So the idea with this deck is we pair these two with cheap cost reduction, like Sigarda's Aid, Kemba's Outfitter, and Kemba, that then enable us to equip these huge equipments in the early game onto one of our creatures and attack for 10 or 20 damage on turn 2 or 3, which is obviously incredibly powerful. So Sigarda's Aid came out in the latest Shadows over Innistrad Remastered set and is such a great addition to the deck. You know, the fact that it gives you equipment flash means that you can blow the opponent out in combat, right? You can attack. If they don't block, then you can just force 10 or 20 damage through in the early game. If they do block, you can still just equip the equipment at instant speed and just blow them out in combat as well. So really great that it gives your equipment flash. And then the other huge upgrade of this over cards like Kemba or Resolute Strike is that you don't need creatures of a particular type to equip, which means that alongside Kemba's Outfitter, we can use Sigarda's Aid to equip just generically powerful cards like Ornithopter or Esper Sentinel, which is a huge upgrade to the deck overall. And we've also got Kemba's Outfitter, which is another great cost reducer. You know, the fact it can reduce the equipment in your hand or the battlefield means that we can run it out on turn 1 and still get the benefit of it. And now the advantage of Kemba's Outfitter over Sigarda's Aid is that the cost reduction is perpetual, so even if the opponent kills the creature that you've equipped, the equipment still keeps that cost reduction, which means that you can just equip it to another creature for 1, which makes it a lot more difficult for the opponent to beat with creature removal compared to something like Sigarda's Aid, which is huge. And then the fact that the cost reduction is perpetual is really nice with Luris as well, because if the opponent does manage to kill, for example, a Colossus Hammer that's been reduced by Kemba's Outfitter, we can just get it back with Luris later in the game, and it still keeps that cost reduction, which is really huge. And then I'm also running Kemba Car Enduring, so this is quite a lot worse than Kemba's Outfitter and Sigarda's Aid because it can only equip itself, or Kemba's Outfitter and Luris of the Dream Den are also cats, so it can equip to them later in the game. But the reason why I wanted to run Kemba here is that one of my goals with this deck is to just increase the range of keepable hands, because this archetype in general does want to mulligan. You never really want to keep a 7-card hand that's speculative, where you have an equipment and no cost reducer, or you have cost reducers and no equipment, because if you don't draw well, then you don't grind particularly well into longer games. You really want to take advantage of these incredibly explosive starts. So you're a deck that generally wants to mulligan to these fast starts, but right now in Historic, because Thoughtseize midrange decks are so prominent, mulliganing at all in general is very risky. So one of my big goals with this particular build of the deck is to increase your range of keepable hands, so you still consistently have access to these fast starts without having to mulligan, and having an extra 2 pieces of cost reduction is huge. I felt like with just 4 Kemba's Outfitter and 4 Sigarda's Aid, you are going to have to mulligan more often, which then makes you more vulnerable to Rakdos Midrange. So having Kemba as the 9th and 10th piece of cost reduction really helps to make sure that you don't mulligan as often, which then increases your matchup against the Rakdos Midrange deck. So then we'll have a look at the other cards in the deck. We've got 4 copies of Ornithopter here, so this is a really great creature to equip in the early game because it just enables very fast starts. So for example, you can go Sigarda's Aid and Ornithopter on turn 1, into Belt of Giant Strength on turn 2, and then you're attacking straight away, which is really huge. You can kill on turn 2 with Ornithopter as well. If you go turn 1 Sigarda's Aid and Ornithopter, and then on turn 2, if you have 2 Colossus Hammers, you can attack for 20 damage out of nowhere. Oh yeah, one thing to mention before I forget is that Colossus Hammer works really well with the Belt of Giant Strength, because if you have a creature equipped with the Colossus Hammer, then the Belt of Giant Strength equip cost will automatically get reduced to 0 because it will have above 10 power. So if you have Colossus Hammer equipped, you can just equip the belt for free, which is really huge. But yeah, anyway, Ornithopter, really great at enabling the fast starts. And the other nice thing about Ornithopter is it also pairs really nicely with Retrofitter Foundry, because you can use Retrofitter Foundry plus Ornithopter to make a 4/4 on turn 1, which is really huge. Speaking of Retrofitter Foundry, like I said, very nice in addition with Ornithopter, but it's just generically powerful. It's a great mana sink to enable you to grind into longer games, and it just repeatedly produces bodies as well, which is very nice if you have a Hammer or Belt of Giant Strength, which you've reduced with the Kemba's Outfitter, because you can just keep producing tokens every turn to equip. So even if the opponent is killing your creatures, you can just repeatedly keep making more bodies to equip every single turn, which is really nice. But in general, the really nice thing about Retrofitter Foundry is it just gives you a good backup plan. Like I said, one of my big goals with this build of the deck is to reduce the amount of times you have to mulligan Worgen. And so we've got, obviously hands where you've got cost reduction in equipment is great, but you also have hands where you've got Retrofitter Foundry and Ornithopter, which as long as you've got something else to go alongside that, you're pretty happy to keep as well. So it just gives you a backup plan, increases your range of keepable hands as well, and just gives you a good mana sink as the game goes along. Then we've got 2 copies of Shadow Spear, so this is another equipment, so it synergizes well with Sigarda's Aid, Outfitter, and Kemba, which is nice, but the Trample and Lifelink are very key keywords in this deck. One of the weaknesses of Colossus Hammer as an archetype in general is if the opponent has chump blockers, it doesn't matter that you've got a 10-10, they can just block it every single turn. So first of all, giving a creature trample to force damage through is really nice, and then Lifelink is incredibly important against other aggro decks. A lot of aggro decks matchups are going to be races, the mirror match, wizards, auras, so giving your creature lifelink, particularly if you have it equipped with a hammer or belt of giant strength, just, basically makes it impossible for any other aggro deck to race you, which is really nice. And then onto the blue splash. So before I get into the specific cards, 2 of the main goals with this deck were, first of all, to make the deck more resilient to interaction, and second of all, like I've said a couple of times, to increase your range of keepable hands, and I feel like the blue splash goes a long way to fix that. So first of all, we've got Invisible Stalker here, which I think is such a great addition to the archetype. So 2 of the main weaknesses of Hammer as an archetype is, like I've mentioned, if the opponent has chump blockers, they can just block and you won't get any damage through. And you're also vulnerable to creature interaction, because if the opponent kills the creature that you've equipped, that's kind of a blowout. And Invisible Stalker basically single-handedly solves both of those problems, because Hexproof means it can't be killed by the opponent's creature removal, and the fact that it can't be blocked means that it can't be chump blocked either. So Invisible Stalker is so difficult for a bunch of decks to deal with, particularly against Rakdos Midrange. This is an absolute nightmare for them to deal with. They can't kill it unless they have Shieldred's Edict, and you have no other creatures in play, which doesn't happen very often at all. And the fact that this can't be blocked means that, you can have curve outs where you go Sigarda's Aid on turn 1, into Invisible Stalker on turn 2, and then equip it with a hammer or a belt, and just put the opponent on a 2-turn clock that they can't block and they can't interact with if they're relying on creature removal as well. So Invisible Stalker, such a difficult threat for other decks to deal with, and can just close the game out of nowhere if you have a way to equip it. And then we've also got Reality Chip, which is a really great addition to this deck because, first of all, it gives the deck a way to grind. One of the big issues I had with the Selesnya version of this deck was that I didn't really feel like it had a good way to play a long game, right? You had explosive starts, but if the opponent had good interaction for what you're doing, you didn't really have a great way to grind into longer games. And Reality Chip, allowing you to play off the top of your library, just enables you to go way over the top. If the opponent can't break up Reality Chip plus the creature you've got equipped, you're just going to run away with the long game because you can cast, because the curve of the deck is so low and you're not running that many lands, on average you're going to be casting 3 or 4 spells off the top plus a land every single turn. So Reality Chip gives you a great way to play the long game, and it also just increases your range of keepable hands as well because it's an equipment, so it works with all of our cost reducers, right? If we have Kemba's Outfitter, we can reduce the cost to 1, which mitigates the big drawback of this, right? The big weakness of Reality Chip as a card is that it's such a big mana investment normally. You pay 2 mana to cast it and then an additional 3 mana to reconfigure, so if the opponent kills the creature you're trying to reconfigure it to, that's such a big blowout. But with Kemba's Outfitter, we can reduce the cost to 1, which is way less of an investment. It also works really well with Sigarda's Aid. We can flash it in and equip it with Sigarda's Aid, which is really powerful even against interactive decks. We can wait for them to tap out, then flash it in during the opponent's turn and automatically equip it, which is a nightmare for a deck like Rakdos to deal with if we equip it to an Invisible Stalker, right? So if we go like Sigarda's Aid on turn 1, into Invisible Stalker on turn 2, and then pass with 2 mana open during the opponent's turn, if they tap out for like a Crucias, for example, we can just flash in the Reality Chip in response while they have no mana available, equip it to the Invisible Stalker, and then if they don't have artifact removal, they have no way of breaking this up because Invisible Stalker has hexproof and Reality Chip stops being a creature once it's equipped. So if they don't have a way to kill the Reality Chip, we're just going to be able to play off the top of our library for the rest of the game, which is going to go way, way over the top of what Rakdos is able to deal with. And so because of that, Reality Chip just increases our range of keepable hands even further because, like I said with Kemba, having Outfitter and Sigarda's Aid plus Kemba means that we maximize our chances of ensuring we have a cost reducer to go along with our equipment. And same thing with Reality Chip. We've got Colossus Hammer and Belt of Giant Strength, but we also have Reality Chip as a card that I'm very happy to keep. So I will keep hands with Sigarda's Aid plus Chip or Outfitter plus Chip or Kemba plus Chip because if we can equip this on turn 2 or 3 off something like a Sigarda's Aid and start playing off the top of our library, that is another way that we can just go over the top and win the game as well. So Reality Chip and Kemba are essentially, copies 9 and 10 of the cost reducer or of a powerful equipment to just increase our range of keepable hands so that we don't have to mulligan as much, which then increases our Rakdos matchup, if that makes sense. Then one card I want to address that I'm not running in this deck is Ingenious Smith. So this is a card that I did try for quite a while, particularly in the Selesnya builds, and I just wasn't super impressed with it. You know, first of all, I just feel like this card is a little bit too slow, particularly, you know, if you keep a speculative hand where you have, like, particularly a Kemba's Outfitter and Ingenious Smith, that's really slow because you can't play the Kemba's Outfitter out on turn 1 if you don't have an equipment, really. You have to wait until you play the Ingenious Smith on turn 2, then pray that you hit a hammer or a belt, and then cast the Kemba's Outfitter afterwards. So, and you know, the main real strength of this deck is you really want to be popping off on turn 2 or 3 as consistently as possible. And I just felt like Ingenious Smith was too slow at doing that. And the other big disadvantage of Ingenious Smith is that I just felt like I didn't have a high enough artifact count to get selection off this. You know, most of the time my builds had like 22 or 23 artifacts, which is really at the low end. And like I said, I just feel like it was too slow overall. So the way I kind of get around that is to just run additional Kembas to make sure that we have additional cost reducers, and run Reality Chip to ensure that we have additional equipment to increase the range of keepable hands without having to rely on something like Ingenious Smith, if that makes sense. So then on top of that, we've also got Luris, which is obviously the best companion in the whole format, has a lot of great synergy with this deck. You know, if we have Retrofit Foundry Ornithopter, we can sacrifice the Ornithopter to make a 4/4, then bring the Ornithopter straight back with the Luris, allowing us to make a 4/4 every single turn, which is really difficult for a lot of decks to beat. Like I said earlier, if we have a Colossus Hammer or belt that we've reduced with the Kemba's Outfitter, if the opponent's killed the hammer or the belt, we can get it back with the Luris and it still has the cost reduction. And it's just a really powerful card in general. You know, it just gives you a guaranteed insurance against flood, which is really important, and it's also a cat, so it pairs nicely with Kemba as well. You know, it's a really good creature to equip with hammer or belt of giant strength because it has lifelink. So Luris just a slam dunk in this deck, really, really powerful. Then in terms of the mana base, we've got 21 lands here, which has felt like a good amount overall. You know, you don't want to be running too many because the curve of the deck is so low, but you know, particularly with Reality Chip, which is a card where once you're playing off the top of your library, you really don't want to hit multiple lands in a row. But the other disadvantage is, you know, you really want to be hitting your third land on curve in a lot of games. And you also have Luris's natural insurance against floods, so you don't want to go too low either. In terms of the actual lands themselves, because we are running a 3-color deck where we need double white for Luris, we need white on turn 1, and we need blue and green on turn 2, we do have to run all dual lands, which is a drawback compared to the Selesnya versions where you can run stuff like Blinkmoth Nexus or Mutavault as an additional utility lands, but I don't really feel like it's much of an issue. I feel like the addition of Invisible Stalker and Chip to this deck solves a ton of issues that the white-green version can't really solve on its own, and I feel like it's worth giving up those utility lands in order to do so. The other disadvantage of it is we do have to run quite a painful mana base to enable the 3-color deck. You know, we have to run 4 mana Confluence and a bunch of shock lands, but in general, this deck is going off really quickly, right? You're killing on turn 3 or 4 a lot of the time, or you're producing such a big board state in the early game that the extra damage that you take off these cards doesn't really matter that much. And like I said, we've got 2 copies of Shadow Spear to gain life back as well, so I've not really found the painful mana base to be that much of an issue. So that's the main deck overall. Like I said, I've been really happy with it. I felt like the 2 main issues I had with the Selesnya version is that they're quite vulnerable to interaction, which, you know, is not great when Rakdos Midrange is so popular right now. And I also felt like, you know, in addition to that, you're a deck that wants to mulligan, but mulliganing because Rakdos Midrange is so popular and Thought Seizes everywhere is very risky. And I feel like Invisible Stalker and Reality Chip in the main deck go a really long way to make sure that we have explosive hands, but we have them consistently enough that we don't have to mulligan. And I feel like Invisible Stalker is just such a powerful card in the archetype in general that the blue splash is worth it. Plus we get Spell Pierce in the sideboard that I'll get to in a second. But speaking of, we'll go through the sideboard. So 4 copies of Portable Hole here for additional interaction against the matchups where we need it. So, you know, predominantly this is for like wizards and auras, but any other creature deck this is important. I feel like 1 mana interaction is particularly important right now to be able to take out stuff like Llanowar Elves and Symmetry Sage on turn 1, you know, being able to take out Esper Sentinel in mirror matches or just Esper Sentinel decks in general without giving them a card draw. Being able to take out Thalia on turn 2 is really important. And the one weakness of Portable Hole is post sideboard, other decks are going to be bringing in artifact removal against you to take out your equipment, which also happens to hit the Portable Hole, but I don't really feel like there's a better option. You know, the only other option I can think of at the 1 mana slot here is Fragment Reality, which is a powerful card, but for the matchups where we want it, I don't really feel it's great. Like, so for example, if we use this against Wizards to take out a Dreadhorde Arcanist or a Balmor, we give them a Symmetry Sage or a Soulscar Mage, which is really bad. Against Auras, if we use this to take out a Spirit Dancer or a Light Paws, we give them an Esper Sentinel or a Scroll, which is really bad. And against like the Lurrus Artifact aggro decks or the Mirror Match, if we use this to take out a 2-drop, we give them Esper Sentinel, or even if we use this to take out a 1-drop, we give them an Ornithopter, which isn't great. So I definitely feel like Portable Hole is the better option out of the two. Chalice of the Void is a card I am slightly concerned about with this deck because we have so many 1-drops, but I've only faced Chalice once in tons of matches that I've played with this deck, so I feel like this is fine for the moment. If Chalice of the Void does become more popular suddenly, then you could consider running March of Otherworldly Light, but like I said, it's not been an issue for me at all. Barely any decks can even afford to run it, and I've only faced it once in a very fringe matchup, so that's not really a concern right now, but if it does suddenly pop up, you can just switch to run some March of Otherworldly Light as a consideration to that. We've also got 2 copies of Pithing Needle, so this is here for a number of matchups, but predominantly this is here for Goblins because Trashmaster is such a hard card to beat, and I've come across quite a few people running my Crucias version, which can consistently tutor for Trashmaster post-sideboard, so having Pithing Needle to name Trashmaster really helps to fix that matchup. If they don't have Trashmaster, they really struggle to beat you. If they do, they can just constantly blow up all of your artifacts, which is a real problem. And then it does have applications in other matchups as well. This is really good against both Yawgmoth and Kethis combo. Just name their namesake card and stop them from comboing off. And it's also good against Devotion and naming Karn to shut that off as well. So it does have applications in other matchups. And then we've also got 1 Tormod's Crypt, 3 Soul Guide Lantern as Graveyard Hate. Now, running 4 pieces of Graveyard Hate might seem excessive, but I feel it's very important for the Reanimator matchup because post-sideboard we have no way to beat a resolved Serra's Emissary naming creature, which is a very big issue. And I feel like you really want to maximize your chances of drawing your Graveyard Hate. Now, there are other potential options. You could board in Portable Hole or Pithing Needle to stop Priest of Fell Rites, but I don't really feel like that's an effective way to shut the deck off because they're going to be bringing in extra Fragment Realities against you, and they can just Fragment Reality at the end of your turn to hit your Portable Hole or Pithing Needle, unlocking the Priest of Fell Rites to allow them to reanimate, whereas, at least with the Graveyard Hate, you can just crack it in response to exile their whole graveyard. And also, neither of these cards shut off Unburial Rites, so in that matchup, if you don't have Graveyard Hate, they can often just race you, get an Emissary into play, and lock you out of the game. So I feel like 4 pieces of Graveyard Hate is very important for that matchup. And then running 4 pieces of Graveyard Hate also improves your matchup quite a lot against decks like Phoenix and Kethis combo. And now the reason I'm running Tormod's Crypt and Soulguide Lantern over something like Unlicensed Hearse is predominantly because it just doesn't interrupt your curve as much, right? Tormod's Crypt is the perfect Graveyard Hate for this sort of deck because you can play it for 0 mana and it doesn't alter your ability to commit to the board or apply pressure at all, right? You can go like Sigarda's Aid Ornithopter, Tormod's Crypt on turn 1, into Belt of Giant Strength on turn 2, for example, and you still have Graveyard Hate in play without interrupting your curve at all. The reason I'm not running more than 1 Tormod's Crypt is because it is pretty bad in multiples, whereas Soulguide Lantern you can at least cycle away if you do draw it in multiples, which is nice. The other 2 advantages of running Tormod's Crypt and Soulguide Lantern over Unlicensed Hearse, first of all, I think it's just much better against Kethis combo because they generally care about a high density of cards in the graveyard rather than specific stuff, so being able to exile their whole graveyard in one go is very important. And additionally, they both also work really well with Lurrus. We can loop these with Lurrus over and over again to repeatedly get Graveyard Hate. Soulguide Lantern also allows us to draw a card every single turn off Lurrus, so I really like this. Now, if you really did want to fit another card in the sideboard, you could consider cutting the 3rd Soulguide Lantern for something else, but I feel like the Reanimator matchup will be quite tough if you do that, so I've been a big fan of 4 pieces of Graveyard Hate for that reason. And then finally, we've got 4 copies of Spell Pierce, so this is another huge reason to be splashing blue, and I feel like this is another card that really helps to solve a lot of the issues I was having with the Selesnya versions. Now, Loran's Escape, which does a similar thing in the Selesnya version, is a very powerful card, but it's, it doesn't stop mass artifact removal like Brotherhood's End and Divine Purge, which is a very big issue. Spell Pierce does essentially the same thing that Loran's Escape does, but it can stop, the mass artifact removal like Brotherhood's End, Shatterstorm, and Divine Purge. Can also stop the opponent's proactive plays, is very good against a deck like Goblin Charbelcher as well. So Spell Pierce is another card that gives the deck that extra resilience. Same sort of thing as Invisible Stalker against the Rakdos matchup. Spell Pierce is just really, really good at stopping the opponent's interaction. Stops Kolaghan's command, stops Brotherhood's Ends. Now, Crucias can be a little bit annoying if they start generating treasures. It can be easier for the opponent to pay the 2 on this, but it's definitely felt like the best card at shutting down the opponent's interaction against us. And is also, the nice thing about this is it's not entirely reactive. We can stop the opponent's proactive game plan as well with it. So the blue splash has really felt worth it overall. Like I said, I think Invisible Stalker is such a great addition to the archetype. I really like Reality Chip and Kembat are just increasing the range of keepable hands without having to mulligan more often. I think Chip gives the deck card advantage that the Selesnya version really struggled with. And, you know, in general, Stalker and Spell Pierce just makes life a lot more difficult for the Rakdos matchup, which I did struggle with the Selesnya version. So that's the deck overall. I've been really happy with it. If you've got any questions about the deck at all, definitely let me know in the comments. Next time I've got some gameplay, I've just got 5 matches that I was playing with on the ladder so you guys can see it in action. So I hope you enjoy the gameplay. Big up. Okay, sweet. Here we go. Oh, by the way, if you're watching this back on a later date and you're wondering what all these weird like VHS effects are, I'm playing on April 1st, so this is the April Fools for this year, basically. Okay, so I'm not thrilled to keep a one-lander, but, you know, as one-landers go, this is pretty sick, right? We've got Sigarda's Aid and Ornithopter into Colossus Hammer on turn 2, so we can potentially be attacking in for 10 damage off the Sigarda's Aid here. We also have Shadow Spear and Reality Chip, so if we can find the second land, we can potentially equip both the Hammer and the Shadow Spear, or we could just equip the Reality Chip if we're worried about interaction. So I'm going to run out both Ornithopters here, just in case they decide to kill one of them. Right, you know, they could very well go, you know, land, kill one of the Ornithopters. Okay, opponent leads on Thoughtseize, so that's pretty rough. I assume they take the Hammer here, so we really want to see another land. Okay, perfect. So that's really good. We saw another land, so I definitely want to equip the Reality Chip here. I think the advantage of doing it now is if we hit exactly Ornithopter on the top, we can put it into play, but I think I'd rather wait, because if they tap out for something like a Bloodtithe Harvester, then that clears the way for us to get Reality Chip equipped. Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah, now we can get Reality Chip equipped, whereas if we played it during our main phase, they could be incentivized to hold up removal instead. So we get to immediately equip the Reality Chip here. Okay, Ornithopter on top, so we get to cast that for free. Land off the top, that's great. Okay, so we hit another land, which is a little bit unfortunate, but we did get, you know, got an additional land and an Ornithopter in play here. And we can still reconfigure, you know, now we've got Invisible Stalker, we can potentially reconfigure the Reality Chip on Visible Stalker if they do kill Ornithopter. I'm going to hold on to Shadow Spear here because if they try and use Harvester to kill the Ornithopter that we've got equipped with Reality Chip, we can flash in Shadow Spear in response to buff it to 3 toughness so it doesn't die. And if they don't use the Bloodtithe Harvester here, we can just end of turn Shadow Spear onto Invisible Stalker, which is going to be really hard for them to deal with. Okay, so they loot away the blood token, so opponent obviously realizes here that we could just buff the Ornithopter so it doesn't get killed by the Harvester. Okay, interesting. They choose not to attack, so we'll definitely flash in the Shadow Spear here and equip it to the Invisible Stalker, and then hopefully we'll get good stuff off the top of the library here. Second Shadow Spear, not ideal, obviously, because we just lose it to the Legend rule. Okay. Oh, no, wait. We've already got Sigarda's Aid, so that's not the best. Oh, well, get a second one in play either way. Okay, Kemba's outfit is not bad. Now we can give the Reality Chip that we've got in play equip 1, so that even if they do kill the Ornithopter now, it only costs us 1 mana to equip on later turns. Okay, we did break a little bit there, but, you know, we still got a decent amount of card advantage. Second Sigarda's Aid could be good if they're running Invoke Despair in the main, which, I doubt that'll be relevant, but, you know, as long as they don't have ways to stop us comboing off the top here, we should be good. Okay, Shielded's a slight issue, but we already have Shadow Spear on the Stalker, so if we can find a Hammer or a Belt off the top, that's going to be really hard for them to race. Okay, they attack with the Harvester. We'll just trade with the outfits here for sure. Don't want them to get in for an additional damage when they already have Shielded in play. Okay, Scott land on top. Really hope to hit something else. Oh, perfect. Okay, there's a Belt, so we can automatically equip that to the Invisible Stalker here. The opponent can't even trade with the Shielded because it has unblockable, so that turns it into an 11-11. Then we can get a Retrofit Foundry into play, which allows us to turn these Ornithopters into 4/4s if we want. But yeah, we get in for 11 here. I don't think Rakdos is going to have any way to kill Invisible Stalker here. They basically need artifact removal to take out the Belt to even have a chance to survive here. Okay, Season Pyromancer does gain them an extra 4 life, but, you know, generally Rakdos doesn't run artifact removal in the main deck, so I very much doubt they're going to be able to break this up. You know, this is an example of Stalker being really good. Okay, sick. I mean, Reality Chip put in a lot of work there as well. So this is definitely a matchup we want the Spell Piercers in for sure. And then I think we're just going to trim some one-offs here. Don't think we need the second Shadow Spear. Going to trim on a Foundry and an Ornithopter as well. And then probably going to trim on a Kemba as well. And then everything else I think is pretty good. You know, there is there is a little bit of non-synergy between Reality Chip and Spell Pierce in that you know, it can stop you going off on the top of your library, but, you know, having Spell Pierce on the top of your library off Reality Chip for the opponent's turn can be pretty useful, especially if they're likely to cast something like Brotherhood's End or Kolaghan's Command. And yeah, Spell Pierce is really nice in this matchup because the cards that we're most worried about, Brotherhood's End, Kolaghan's Command, even Abrade to a certain extent, are all counterable off Spell Pierce, which makes a huge difference. You know, in the Selesnya versions, you had Loran's Escape, which I think is just decent, but is not great against Brotherhood's End, right? It can only save one thing. And so Spell Pierce being able to counter that, as well as just being able to stop stuff like, you know, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, you know, any other non-creatures that they might run is pretty good. So this isn't a hand I would normally keep in the dark, but since I know we're against Rakdos Midrange here, you don't really want to mulligan if you can avoid it. And we have got Sentinel on one. We've also got, we've also got Sigarda's Aid and Outfitter, so if we draw an equipment like a hammer, a belt, or a reality chip, we're pretty much good to go. And drawing that hammer off the top is sick. So now we can go Sigarda's Aid into hammer potentially if they... okay, I was going to say if they tap out for something like a Blood-Tithe Harvester, we can just equip the hammer to Sentinel, make it an 11/11, and make it really hard for the opponent to... Well, it basically guarantees us a 2-for-1 off the next removal spell. Now, we could cast Sigarda's Aid here, but I think going into turn 3, I want to hold open Spell Pierce, especially because we have 2 of them. So, if they try and kill the Outfitter with something that isn't Fatal Push, or they go for Fable, we can just snap off a Spell Pierce here, and still have the second one as a backup. Okay, Molten Impact, perfect. So, had they had Fatal Push, that would have been a little bit awkward. Because they had Molten Impact, we could counter it there. This is kind of awkward because this does mean that we put shields down for Spell Pierce here. They could very well have Brotherhood's End, but on this board, Brotherhood's End isn't even that... Well, I mean, killing the Colossus Hammer is kind of a big deal, but I feel like we just got to take the opportunity here to get it equipped. And then if they don't have an immediate removal spell for the Outfitter here, you know, if they're reliant on stuff like Molten Impact, we can then hold open Spell Pierce for future turns, which is pretty important. But yeah, them having a Fatal Push here could put us in a bit of a weird spot. Retrofitter Foundry can produce tokens that we can equip the hammer to, but we need an extra land, really, to be able to do that consistently. You know, this is the kind of spot where I'm glad we're not running below 21 lands, because we do, you know, this is kind of a highlight of a spot where you do want your third land to be able to use the Foundry and, you know, hold open Spell Pierce as well. So opponent's in the tank here. Okay, they snap off a Fable. I mean, to be honest, at this point in the game... Okay, there's a third land. That's perfect. I was going to say, at this point in the game, you know, we could have used Spell Pierce on Fable if we had the mana for it, but I think I would rather hold Spell Pierce for something more impactful like a Brotherhood's End. Although, to be honest, we are getting to the point in the game now where if they have their 5th land, they can pay for the Spell Pierce, which is a bit, you know, concerning. So if they do have land Brotherhood's End, Spell Pierce doesn't quite get the job done here, but we still have Luris to be able to get back the Colossus Hammer. It won't kill the Kemba's Outfitter either. So we'll have to see what the opponent does here. I mean, there's a chance they might go for something else first, in which case we can Spell Pierce. I mean, they do know that we have Spell Pierce now, though, because we've already played one. So not too difficult for the opponent to play around it. But, you know, generally, if they don't have an answer here, we're just going to be applying way too much pressure. They kind of need to get a blocker in play, or just a way to kill the Outfitter here. Or the Hammer, obviously. Interesting decision point where if they pass doing nothing, I don't even know if I'll go for... Actually, I don't know. I feel like I probably should activate the Foundry, because even if they do have Fatal Push, then we're creating an extra token to be able to equip with the Colossus Hammer here. So even though we do go shields down at the end step to make an extra token here, I still think it's worth doing, because the only thing we really get blown... I guess this gets blown out by exactly Abrade, but if they have any creature removal, this works out fine, because then we have another creature in play that we can equip with the hammer. So the only card that this gets blown out by in this exact spot is Abrade. If they have Fatal Push or any other removal spell, then... yeah, like Shieldred's Edict, then it's definitely worth doing. Because now we get a 1-1 into play that doesn't have Summoning Sickness, so we can equip the hammer here, force them to chump block with the Harvester. Now, it is a bit annoying that their Fable flips, so they get a guaranteed chump block again next turn. And it is slightly annoying as well that the hammer gets rid of flying, because if it didn't, then we could use the Foundry here to make a 1-1 Thopter and then equip it and attack in the air, but obviously the Colossus Hammer makes the creature lose flying, so that doesn't work, obviously. But yeah, we'll see what the opponent does here. So they've got Reflection as a chump blocker. We could potentially... Oh wow, there's the Brotherhood's End. Okay, sick. So they didn't have the 5th land, and we get to stop them with Spell Pierce. That's huge. That's really, really big. I mean, we could still win with Shadow Spear off the top. Something like Invisible Stalker would also be a great draw here. Okay, Mana Confidence not the best draw, but we can still just attack, force them to block unless they have a Fatal Push. And then we can put Luris into hand, which then, you know, if they do have another Brotherhood's End, gives us a way to recover. And we still have the 2 mana available to make another token off the Foundry. So even if they do draw like a Fatal Push off the top, we can still just create another token and then just equip the hammer afterwards. So I feel pretty good about this spot. Them not having the 5th land and us being able to spell pierce that Brotherhood's End was huge in terms of tempo, because the opponent is basically now just forced to block with everything they play. You know, even if they have removal spell plus creature, we can just make another 1/1 off the Foundry. Now having, you know, if they do draw another Brotherhood's End here, that does put us back a little bit, but we can just go Luris, bring back the hammer, and we get to automatically equip it because of Sigarda's Aid, which means that if they have Molten Impact, that doesn't work as removal either. Well, they're shocking the Blood Crypt. Okay, got Crucias. Okay, and Blood Tithe Harvester, sure. So, opponent's forced to block with one of these, obviously. If I had to guess, maybe they block with the Blood Tithe Harvester because Crucias can help them find removal spells, but... So we could play Luris out here, but I think that's just unnecessarily risky. I think I'll just attack with the 11/11 and just make more tokens with the Foundry, because at this point I feel like we're only really going to get blown out by a sweeper. I mean, I guess Brotherhood's End... Brotherhood's End, they'd have to name Artifact at this point, right? So maybe it's fine to play Luris, but I feel like, you know, with Retrofit a Foundry, I'd rather just hold on to it. Maybe that's a misplay. Maybe I'm supposed to run it out, but... You know, maybe they're running... I guess even Extinction Event wouldn't do it here, right? So, yeah, maybe because the only thing I'm really worried about is Brotherhood's End, maybe I should play the Luris out, but I feel like it's, you know, worth holding on to here. If they draw a discard spell, we basically just win anyway, because that's kind of a dead draw for them, so... But yeah, it's close. Maybe we're supposed to run out Luris. Not 100% sure. So, opponent's in the tank here. Okay, Liliana, that doesn't do it surely, right?
No more distractions. Let's make this quick.
We can just make another token off the Foundry. Yeah, think about it, like my logic for not playing Luris was I want to play around a sweeper, but the only sweeper that they play is Brotherhood's End, and they'd have to name Artifact, so maybe I'm supposed to run out Luris. Not 100% sure here. But yeah, we'll untap the Foundry, we'll make a 1/1 flyer, and then we can force them to chump block, attack down the Liliana. Oh, wow, okay. Drew an Invisible Stalker. That's pretty sick. So now, I mean, I was going to play Luris out because I think it was probably a slight misplay not to play it last turn because Brotherhood's End is the main thing we're worried about here, but I think I'm happy to just run out the Stalker here, and that's basically a guaranteed win next turn now, because even if they draw Brotherhood's End, if they name Artifact, then we just play Luris, equip the hammer. If they name Creature, then we just attack them with the 11/11. So, again, it might be correct to run out Luris, but... I mean, yeah, I think we're winning either way. So, yeah, sweet, we got there. Nice. Okay, sweet, so we're going first here. And, I can't keep that one, obviously. This is... I think I'm going to risk this. We don't have a piece of equipment, but... On a 6, I think we're going to go for this. If we draw like a hammer or a belt or even a reality chip off the top, this hand's really good, right? We can go Stalker on 2, then just start equipping it. So we do have to get kind of lucky. You know, this isn't the kind of hand that I would keep on a 7, but on a 6, I think you got to risk it. Also, we do have the Retrofit Foundry as well. So if we draw an Ornithopter, then that's also pretty good. So didn't draw anything great for the second turn, but again, you know, next turn is the big draw step really. So looks like we're against Wizards here, which isn't the most forgiving matchup, unfortunately. You know, we don't have a particularly fast start, and Wizards almost always does. So this could just be, yeah. I still think the hand was probably correct to keep on 6. You know, maybe, well, I don't know, like, there is definitely an argument to shipping back any hand until like 5 that doesn't have both an equipment and a cost reducer, but and obviously if I'd known I was against Wizards, I would have mulliganed much more aggressively to a fast start, but I feel like in the dark that hand's probably defensible. Not 100% sure though, I think it's quite close. And I feel like we probably are just going to get overwhelmed here, because even if we draw a hammer off the top here, I guess we do put them on a 2-turn clocks out of nowhere. And we can make a 1/1 blocker here for the Soulscar Mage, but I feel like we could potentially be dead on the next turn anyway. Right, they have a Symmetry Sage. They're drawing a bunch of cards here. They're going to be drawing 4 off this Mentor's Guidance. So yeah, we're definitely getting punished for a risky keep. And this kind of exemplifies that the deck definitely does want to mulligan, because if you do keep a speculative hand like this where you have we have the cost reducers, but we don't have the equipment. If you don't draw the equipment and you're up against a fast deck, you can just get completely run over. So maybe I was wrong to keep this. Maybe I'm supposed to go to 5 before I start keeping more speculative hands. But, again, if I'd drawn a hammer earlier, then we could potentially be winning this turn anyway. So I'm going to keep attacking with the Invisible Stalker because I feel like that's my only out in this situation. At least now we have Ornithopters that can make... we can turn into 4/4s, we can play Lurus to keep looping them now. I very much doubt that's going to be good enough here. Opponent has a full grip of cards and 3 creatures in play, so, we are definitely getting punished for the keep. Wow, now they have Balmor, so we can't even chump block anymore. So, yeah, I think we're probably even dead this turn, I imagine, but... yeah, I don't know. Maybe this is a learning experience. Maybe you're supposed to ship back any hand that doesn't have an equipment and a cost reducer until you get to a 5-card hand, maybe? It's hard to say. I mean, but again, like I said, if I'd drawn a Colossus Hammer or a Belt, the turn after I played the Stalker, then we probably could have won this. So, I don't know. It's close. Well, I mean, we're definitely losing this one, but... yeah, that was a little bit rough. So now we know against Wizards, we're definitely not going to keep any hand that doesn't have interaction or a very fast start. So Reality Chip is definitely too slow for this matchup, I think. So we definitely want the 4 portable holes, and I think I'll just trim the Kemba. I think everything else is pretty important. Invisible Stalker is very good against their interaction. Definitely want the both Shadow Spears here. And then I think, we also want Retrofit a Foundry. Ornithopter, Ornithopter can chump block in the air and be turned into 4/4s in the early game. Particularly on the play, I think... Retrofit a Foundry into Ornithopter and start attacking with 4/4s can definitely apply enough pressure in the early game. So, yeah, I mean, that last game was a little bit rough. That keep was pretty borderline. I mean, we obviously needed luck off the top. Maybe in the dark you're supposed to go down to 5, but then again, if we've been against Rakdos, I definitely want to keep that hand at 6 because mulliganing even further is risky. So, I'm not 100% sure what was the right line here. But yeah, either way, this hand is great, right? We've got Sagada's Aid into Ornithopter. I think it's worth running the Thopter out here, even though they could use removal on it, just because if they tap out for a creature, we can just equip the hammer straight away. Okay. They pass with the mana open, so super risky here to just go for the hammer. I think I'm just going to go for the Stalker and go for a guaranteed 2-turn clock here. So, like I said, we could have gone for Esper Sentinel plus equip the hammer to the Ornithopter, but if they have a 2-mana burn spell, that slows our clock down quite a lot, whereas Stalker here basically just guarantees a 2-turn clock. They don't have any way to interact with it. They would need exactly a Braid to break this up, so I think this is probably the better line. Wow, they don't even have any creatures yet. They're going for Mentor's Guidance, so yeah, I think we should be good here. Wow, we drew Belt as well. Okay, 6. So even if they have a Braid now, we should be good, I think. So we equip the hammer to the Stalker, put them on a 2-turn clock. They need exactly a Braid here because they don't have any other way to kill Stalker. And then we can just run out the Esper Sentinel. So yeah, obviously this game is like night and day to what happened last game. I mean, opponent not having any creatures is obviously good for us, but even if they'd had creatures, I think we're still fairly easily winning this one. So that was more like it, right? When we have a clear hand of equipment plus cost reducer, that shows how much more powerful it is. Now going into game 3, again, we kind of need... I think I'm going to mulligan any hand that doesn't have either equipment plus cost reducer, Retrofit a Foundry plus Ornithopter, or interaction. Portable Hole does help. Maybe I could see keeping Speculative Hand with Portable Hole because it does slow the opponent down as well. But in general, those sorts of hands that we just saw are the ones that we're looking for, where we just have a fast hammer. If we can get it through their removal, they're basically forced into the back foot, which is what we want. If you can force Wizards to start blocking and not attacking, that's when you're in a good spot. I don't think we can keep that. This is a risky one, but I think I'm going to keep it, right? We do have Cost Reducer and the Belt. But we have obviously Foundry plus Ornithopter, but we do obviously need the second land. I mean, having said that, we are running 21, so the chances of drawing our second land are fairly high, I think. But, I mean, and getting a 4/4 down on turn 1 is huge here. Okay, we got the Portable Hole, so don't have to worry about the Arcanist straight away here. I mean, it is interesting because Oh, perfect. We did draw a second land. Bit annoying that it's a mana confluence, so we are going to be dealing ourselves a lot of damage, but we're very much on the front foot in this this game now. We can run out the Outfitter, reduce the cost of the belt, and now we're representing a lot of damage potentially. Now, it is hard to say what type of interaction or sideboard hate the opponent's likely to have. Now, from my experience, Wizards is a deck that generally has Abrades rather than Brotherhood's End. I've not seen that many Wizards deck running Brotherhood's End. I mean, I don't think we're in really a position to play around Brotherhood's End, even if they do have it. But thankfully, most lists that I've seen, Brotherhood's End is a very slow card from the Wizards' perspective. They generally want to have cheaper stuff. So interesting point here whether we want to play the Stalker or the Belt. I think playing the Stalker is just too greedy. Stalker is definitely the better line if we know we're going to draw the third land off the top. But since we don't know that, if we play the Stalker out and we don't draw a third land, that represents... we're potentially missing 8 points of damage next turn, which is insane, right? If we play the Belt out here, we can get punished by a Braid, but if they don't have artifact removal, we can just equip the Outfitter and attack in for 14 damage total. Whereas if we play the Stalker and we don't draw our third land, then we're just missing out on a ton of damage next turn. And to be honest, they don't have a great way to stop the Belt once it's equipped. We can try and equip the Outfitter. If they kill it in response, we can just equip the 4/4 instead. So the opponent doesn't have great points of interaction at this point outside of maybe a Braid. So we'll see if they attack here. They probably can't because we could have Portable Hole. Yeah, they hold it back. So like I said, this is a point in the game where we are, forcing Wizards to start blocking shows you're in a good spot. So definitely going to attack with both here. I assume they have to block the Outfitter for sure. Might let the 4/4 through. It does look like the opponent does have a spell here though. Okay, they block with the Balmor. So we could play Sigarda's Aid here, but I don't know if it's risky. Wizards can force through a ton of damage. We don't have any blockers, so I think I'm going to hold back on the Sigarda's Aid. We're so far ahead on board that I don't think it should matter, really. Maybe that's wrong. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't really want to... Oh, wow. They do have Brotherhood's End. Okay. Now I'm regretting not playing the Sigarda's Aid because now I'm in a spot now where exactly Colossus Hammer wins us the game and Belt doesn't because I didn't play the Sigarda's Aid earlier. So I kind of wish I had now, but I didn't even know they were playing Brotherhood's End. Hopefully we're not dead this turn, but yeah, we're probably dead if we don't draw a Hammer this turn. I think we survive here though, so we need Hammer or Bust. Belt doesn't get us there because we didn't play the Sigarda's Aid earlier, which I'm really regretting now. So yeah, I think, we were at a healthy enough life total where I probably should have just played the Aid. Oh my god, okay. Wow, that was the best top deck. So we got quite lucky there, I'm not going to lie, and I should have definitely played the Aid earlier, and then Belt would have been a good top deck, but wow, managed to steal that one. Okay, I'm pretty happy about that. I mean, to be fair, we didn't know they had Brotherhood's End, but I don't think we could have played around it. Definitely misplayed with the Sigarda's Aid, but we got lucky with the top deck anyway, so sick. Okay, so we're going second here. And, I mean, this is close to keeping, but without blue and without a second land, I think I'm going to have to ship this one back, unfortunately. Okay, this is a lot better though, right? We've got Sigarda's Aid, we've got Foundry plus Stopter and Invisible Stalker, so as long as we can find an equipment, we're good. Turn 1 Thoughtseize is pretty rough though. I assume they either take the Foundry or the Sigarda's Aid here. Okay, opponent takes the Foundry, but we do draw a Reality Chip off the top, which is pretty sick. So now we get to go Sigarda's Aid, Ornithopter. Almost definitely going to run out Stalker on 2 here, unless they have another Thoughtseize. Oh yikes! They do have another Thoughtseize. So interesting choice. Wow, they keep they let us have the Reality Chip, which I think I'm less happy there if they take the Reality Chip, because at least this gives us a way to grind. I mean, I guess they could kill the Ornithopter in response to the chip, and I guess from their point of view, it's very risky leaving me with the Invisible Stalker in case I draw a Hammer off the top. They tap out for Fable though, so we get to automatically equip the chip here, which is pretty huge. Okay, we get Shadow Spear off the top. And Invisible Stalker we can still cast because of the land in our hand, thankfully. So we get to cast a Stalker off the top as well. Then we do hit another land. I think I'm going to attack here, might as well. Just because, I'm not blocking with this Ornithopter, so I might as well attack with it. But yeah, if the opponent can't break up, I mean, they can obviously kill the Ornithopter here, but we can then just reconfigure the reality chip to the invisible stalker. So they need removal for both the Ornithopter and the reality chip here to stop us from comboing, going off the top of our library. And if they let us, if we can reconfigure the invisible stalker with the reality chip, it's going to be really difficult for them to break it up. They need artifact removal in the main deck to stop us. So I'm going to go for it. They need Fatal Push here to kill the reality chip to stop this. Wow, we get to go for it. So then we can play Esper Sentinel off the top. And I'm going to attack here. We're not blocking with the invisible stalker, so I might as well attack. I'm kind of surprised they didn't attack with the 2/2 last turn, because, we could obviously block with the reality chip, but they still would have got a treasure out of it. Now they attack. Makes sense. But yeah, I think they're going to struggle. I mean, they've got shielded, but we're playing off the top of the library, so it's going to be hard for them to stop us. Unless we brick here. If we hit 2 lands, that's going to be rough. We got a Confluence. Oh, sick. Okay. There's a Belt, and we've got Shadow Spear in play as well. So unfortunately, that's just short of lethal, because we only have 11 power on the Invisible Stalker here, but I think this is going to be basically impossible for the opponent to beat. Yeah, okay, sick. We got there. Nice. Okay, so against Rakdos Midrange, same as before, Spell Pierce is in. I'm going to trim a Shadow Spear, Ornithopter, Kemba, and Retrofitter Foundry. Now, it might seem weird trimming the Retrofitter Foundry, but Foundry is kind of like... I mean, first of all, it's weak to that artifact removal, and second of all, it's... Unless you have Retrofitter Foundry plus Ornithopter, which we're less likely to do considering we're trimming an Ornithopter, it is kind of like an ancillary game plan, right? The main thing we want to be doing here is equipping the Hammer the Belt or the reality chip, and Retrofitter Foundry is very powerful with Ornithopter, but outside of that, it can be a little bit slow. Now, it does give you a good way to grind in Rakdos, so, if you wanted to trim maybe the second Kemba, I could see that, but I feel I'm pretty happy sideboarding like this, especially because we're cutting the Ornithopter. I think the Foundry does lose a bit of value there. But yeah, I could see maybe trimming a Kemba instead. So this hand, we've got Foundry Thopter. Wow, we've got Sigarda's Aid as well now. That's pretty good. I think I'm still going to go for Foundry on turn 1 here, although there's an argument for going for Sigarda's Aid to get the early reality chip down as well. But, typically, even though this hand doesn't have... Well, before we do the Sigarda's Aid, it doesn't have everything we want. You really don't want to mulligan against Rakdos if you can avoid it, and I think this hand is perfectly good. So, we do lose the Sigarda's Aid or the reality chip here, potentially, which is a little bit rough, but we do get to get a 4/4 down. Now, the opponent could obviously have a Fatal Push, but I'm not really too concerned when we have the second Ornithopter here to make another 4/4, so they could very well push the token here. Okay, they don't. Wow, we drew a Hammer off the top. Okay, that's pretty nice. So, I'm going to lead on Sigarda's Aid here. I don't think it's worth risking equipping the Hammer because they could very well have Fatal Push. I mean, they probably force the Fatal Push now if they have it anyway, right? Because letting 4 damage through when you have the Fatal Push doesn't seem like a great idea. So they do have the push, but we have the Ornithopter here, and I don't think... I'm kind of tempted to not turn this Ornithopter into a 4/4 because if we equip the Ornithopter with the Colossus Hammer, if the opponent tries to kill it in response, we can just sack it to make a 4/4, so we kind of blow them out in terms of their removal. So I think I'm going to flash in the Colossus Hammer here. Okay, Arena's giving away they don't have priority, so that tells me they don't have Fatal Push. Okay, and we draw a Spell Pierce, that's pretty good. So we get to attack him with the Ornithopter here. Opponent can let it through, but they go down to 8, so... Pretty happy with that. Now, obviously, we could put Luris into hand, but I think this is a crucial point in the game where we really want to be holding open Spell Pierce, and we have Retrofitter Foundry as a mana sink as well, so... I was going to say, if they have Brotherhood's End, that's going to be really hard for them to stop, but they must have cheated for the Shatstorm. Okay, that's huge. If that had been Brotherhood's End, we'd have been in trouble. Okay, sick. We got there. Nice. So, yeah, they probably cheated for that off the Crucias, but, yeah, huge. Okay, so we're on the play here. And this is really close to a keep, right? We've got Foundry and Thopter, and we've also got cost reducers, so anything like Hammer off the top is really good, but with 1 land, I think we can do better. Okay, this looks pretty good though, right? We've got Outfitter and 2 pieces of equipment. We've also got Retrofitter Foundry to produce more bodies, so the weakness of this hand is if Outfitter dies, we're in trouble, but that's why I'm keeping the Retrofitter Foundry around here, so that even if it does, we can potentially make more creatures. So Hall of Storm Giants makes me think we're against control. So I think getting Hammer down here is going to be really important before they have access to Sensor, Droid Disruption, or White Mana for interaction. Now, they could have Fading Hope here, but I very much doubt. Wow, they have Stifle. Okay, so we're probably against the Lotus Field variant then, I imagine, which could be a bit rough. Strict Proctor does shut off a few of our cards. But the fact that they're tapping out for Opt here is really nice. That means we're probably going to be able to get in for a hammer attack. Yeah, okay, they play a tap lands, which is pretty huge here, obviously. So definitely going to equip and get in for this damage while the opponent's shields down for sure. And then we can either go for Outfitter or Foundry plus Thopter here. I think it's close. You know, I could see an argument for another one, but I think I'm going to go for the Outfitter here just to equip, you know, change the Belt of Giant Strength to one equip and then pass it, just in case they have Divine Purge. I feel like if they have Divine Purge, we can recover slightly better with Foundry plus Thopter and Belt. Whereas if we go Foundry plus Thopter, Purge is a lot more painful. Okay, opponent just scoops it up. So we, you know, obviously punished control there with a very fast start on the play. Definitely a matchup where we want the Spell Pierce. Shadow Spear's not going to be great here because we don't really need the Trample or the Lifelink. And I think I'm just going to trim an Ornithopter and a Kemba and just run it back like that. You know, there is an argument to maybe keeping Pithing Needle, but that should never really come up, right? If it's getting to the point in the game where the opponent's resolving a Planeswalker, you're probably in trouble anyway. Pithing Needle is mainly here for, like, you know, faster decks like Goblins, Kethis, Yawgmoth, Monogreen Devotion, stuff like that. I don't feel like it's really going to be making much of a difference if you just, you know, bring out a Pithing Needle naming Teferi when the opponent's probably going to have Divine Purge against you anyway. But yeah, I mean, obviously a big part of us stealing that win was being on the play there, right? If the opponent had access to Sensor or Droid Disruption when we were trying to play the Hammer, that could be kind of rough. Okay, this hand's interesting. I think we can keep it, you know, knowing that we're against control, even though we don't have an equipment to go with Sigarda's Aid, we do have two Esper Sentinels here. I mean, Esper Sentinel on turn 1 is just great. We also have Retrofitter, Foundry plus Ornithopter, so I feel pretty confident about this hand. Going to attack here first just to see if the opponent wants to use any removal. I think they're more likely to let the damage through and wait until our main phase 2, and then we can get a second Sentinel out, which is going to be really tough for them to deal with. And then I'm going to go for Foundry plus Thopter here. Even if they have Sensor Draw Disruption, we're going to be drawing 2 if they have it because of the Sentinels, so I'm happy just running it out like this. And then even if they have Divine Purge, we get to draw 2 here, which allows us to recover. We already have Stalker plus Sigarda's Aid, so if we can draw a Hammer or a Belt, we're good. Now, I was stopping there just to consider if the opponent had triple blue mana there, I think I would probably not activate the Foundry because they could have Archmage's Charm, which just completely stops us from attacking. But because they have the basic planes there, I don't need to worry about Archmage's Charm. So even though it might be a little bit greedy when the opponent could have Divine Purge, I'm going to run out the extra Esper Sentinel here just because if they do have Purge, we still get to draw a bunch of cards. Well, they go for March and they exile a card, so that does mean that they don't have to pay for the Sentinel tax, which makes sense. I was planning on activating the Foundry during the opponent's end step anyway, so I might as well just activate it here now. And so the opponent could very well have a sweeper here, but since we have 3 Esper Sentinels in play, I'm not too worried. And they discarded a Teferi, which is obviously great for us as well. Okay, so opponent does have Supreme Verdict, but we get to draw 3 here, which is really big. Perfect, and we find the Belt. Okay, that's really big. So now we can get Stalker into play before they have access to counter spells to shut it off. And then just going to run out Sigarda's Aid. I think keeping open Spell Pierce is very important here. And then we can potentially just flash in the Belt next turn. They're going to have a really hard time dealing with Stalker unless they have another Sweeper. I mean, to be honest, Sweepers does kind of get the job done here because we can Spell Pierce. You know, Spell Pierce doesn't work against Supreme Verdict here. And they have enough mana to pay for the 2 if they do have Divine Purge. But you know, if they have to use a Sweeper here just to kill 1 creature, I'm really not too concerned about that. So they only have 3 mana available, so Spell Pierce is basically guaranteed to stop anything they try here. So I'm just going to try the Belt here. Unfortunately, we are 1 short of lethal, because unlike the Hammer, it doesn't give +10/+10. It changes the stats to 10/10, so even if this gets through, it only puts them down to 1, which is a bit annoying, but okay, they go for Archmage's Charm. Obviously, we're going to snap off Spell Pierce here. So we do put them down to 1, and this is a tricky spot for control. They basically need a Sweeper or they lose here. I don't think there's anything else that can get them out of this because Invisible Stalker has Hexproof. I'm going to run out the Outfitter as well here. You know, that does make us slightly more vulnerable to a Sweeper if they do have it, but we have the second Outfitter in hand, so I'm not, you know, we already have another creature to equip. Okay, nice, we got there, sweet. Okay, so we're going second here. And I can't keep this, obviously. Okay, this is pretty good, though. And this highlights another nice thing about Reality Chip, is it's both a payoff for all of your cost reducers, and it's a creature itself. So normally, you know, this would be kind of a risky keep, but Reality Chip, we can equip Reality Chip with the belt. So not 100% sure whether it's best to put back Shadow Spear or a land here. I think we can probably, you know, do fine off 2 lands, and then if we draw another one off the top, that's obviously ideal, but okay, we do. So now we can go Sigarda's Aid into Chip, and then we can equip it with both the belt and the Shadow Spear here, which is nice. So Forest is pretty good for me to see, I think. Okay, we're against Mono Green Devotion, which is decent. It just shows that they're not going to have any... I was going to say, it just shows that they're not going to have any interaction. They have Besaidu on turn 2, which... That's a little bit rough, but it does mean that they're very slow to develop here. Oh, sick. And we drew the Outfitter off the top. Okay, so that's perfect. Now we can reduce the cost of the belt here and get the Reality Chip into play as a second creature. But the really nice thing about that opening from our point of view from the opponent, you know, obviously it's very lucky that we drew the Outfitter here, but Mono Green Devotion typically is scariest when they have fast starts, and they didn't have an elf on turn 1, and they didn't ramp on turn 2 either. Oh, they just scoop it up. Okay, fair enough. So against Devotion, we definitely want the Pithing Needles here to be able to stop Karn. And then it's interesting whether it's best to bring in Portable Hole or Spell Pierce. I think Reality Chip is probably too slow. I think I prefer Portable Hole in general, just because they can produce a ton of mana to the point where it's easy for them to play around Spell Pierce. And I think that, you know, shutting off their early ramp is generally more important, because even if we have Spell Pierce for Karn and, you know, Storm the Festival and Cure and stuff, they can still just commit their creatures to the board. So I think on balance, Portable Hold is probably better in this matchup. You know, I think it's close, but the main reason I prefer Portable Hold is just that they can easily produce excess mana to the point where Spell Pierce just doesn't act as an effective counter spell. Okay, so can't keep that hand. This hand, I mean, it's very fast if we can draw another creature. Retrofitter Foundry can also produce creatures at worst. I mean, we are kind of relying on racing in this matchup, but I think we can keep this because we do run a lot of creatures as well. So, you know, typically keeping a hand where you don't have a, you know, an equipment or a cost reducer is risky because you only run like 10 copies of each, whereas we run a lot more creatures than that. So I think this hand is generally a safer keep. Okay, interesting. So we don't draw a creature, but we can get Pithing Needle down, naming Karn. Now, Karn's passive can be annoying, but thankfully we have Sigarda's Aid here, which can get around that. We don't need to manually equip anything anymore. So even if they have Karn here, we stop them getting the minus. And, you know, even if we can't draw... to be honest, it is kind of annoying if they go Karn here because it stops us activating the Retrofitter Foundry, which is our only way of making creatures right now. But, like I said, we do have a lot of creatures in the deck, so that shouldn't be too much of an issue. Okay, opponent goes for Love Struck Beast here, sure. Okay, we do draw Invisible Stalker, but we don't have any blue mana, but I think that's fine. We get to activate the Retrofitter Foundry, and the opponent doesn't know about Colossus Hammer, so there's a chance that they attack into us here as well. Okay, there is the Karn, so I'm very glad we have the Pithing Needle. We'll make a token in response because otherwise the Karn passive would shut off the Foundry. But I think there's a good chance the opponent attacks here, which they do. Yeah, sweet. So now we get to just blow them out in combat. Right, we can equip the Colossus Hammer here. And we don't really care about Karn anymore because we have Sigarda's Aid, so we can just start attacking face at this point, I think. And if the opponent has Storm the Festival, there's a chance they don't block here, which allows us to just win. Wow, they don't. Okay, sweet. We just get to get in for over 20 damage then. Okay, sick. Nice. We got there.